welcome back, everyone, to the second part of this episode where we have this really interesting conversation with Modlit, or that which is short for Modern Liturgic. And you all know Father Ryan. You may not know Bliss, but this is a really special project that is a gift to the church that I've really enjoyed for many years now, and wanted to hear more about it from you guys. So thank you for being here, Bliss.
Yeah,
especially.
Yeah, thank you.
And Ryan, good to have you back.
Yeah, we're excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's actually a lot of people who have enjoyed the calendar. If you don't know what we're talking about, we'll get to it. Hang on a second. But have enjoyed what Modern Liturgic has put out, and even like have through it read about the saints and read about the church year. But there hasn't probably been, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not a lot of backstory about you guys or where this came from or any of that kind of thing. So this may be a window, sort of a peek into like, where did this come from and what's this all about and what does this mean for you guys? Have you has this story been told anywhere else? Or are we making news right now?
I don't think we have told it.
Not on a podcast for
you
sure.
Heard it here first,
this is our
folks.
first podcast. Oh, this is my first podcast ever.
Oh, okay, cool. So I want to get into that story, where this came from and what it means to you guys. Let's start just from the top, from the beginning. When did this become? Where were the seeds of this project, this idea? And we should also clarify sort of, I want to know the roles. Like as a married couple, that's got to be interesting to work together, first of all. We won't need to go there because you guys are healthy and have a great relationship. I'm sure it's all super easy and fun.
Always.
But you also have roles in terms of like the whole production of the thing, the creation of the thing. So so let's start with where did this come from? What was the seed that really started? When did the spark come of like, wait, I got an idea? And whose was that? And how did that work? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I worked actually where you went to school for a long time. I worked at Nashotah House. At the Nashotah House as their art director. So that was my very first introduction to liturgy at all. I think maybe
that's
I had
a pretty
been,
high introduction.
I know. Just start huge and like so, and I loved it. It was a lot, and I was learning about it for work. And
we should pause because there's some insider stuff here for the listener. The Nashotah House is an Anglican Episcopal seminary in Nashotah, Wisconsin, west of Milwaukee, about 30 minutes. It's beautiful. And it is known for, founded by Jackson Kemper, a missionary bishop. So it has this really beautiful mix of like a heritage of mission and is known for its high church liturgy, its reverence, its beauty. It's an amazing place. So that's what we're talking about. Continue. Sorry.
Thank you
so
for that.
House, right?
You said that much better than I would. So I worked there. I was absorbing everything. I was learning. Then we ended up planting an Anglican church in Milwaukee. And a couple years later, in 2017, we were kind of at like a different place where things had turned out differently with the church than we thought. And some of the ways that the trajectory of our family was even different than we thought. And so it really came out of like this desire to create something, to understand something. So as a visual person and a creative, I was hearing just this like onslaught of like amazing information that growing up in, not a liturgical setting, I really had no context for it. I didn't ever study the saints or do any liturgy or really hardly any church history. So, this was just like fire hose, amazing. I loved it.
It's a whole new world.
But I couldn't sort it out. I couldn't see it all. I couldn't find something that I could look at and find the whole thing, and or maybe it was so much information at once that it felt like I couldn't absorb it. So, I decided to just make something for our family. I showed Ryan, and then
was like a calendar, or was
I first did the circle. I first did the circle.
Okay. Ryan can hold that up.
I can hold it up for our viewers.
I wanted to see all the colors. I wanted to see some of the major feast days and how they fit into that, what transitions were made during the year. So that was the first thing that we did. And
we should also acknowledge here, because again, if people don't know who you are, they're like, oh, she just had all this input from church history and beauty and just decided, let me just whip something up. You're a designer. You're an artist.
Thank you.
You have a whole background, right?
Yes.
In design. And Bliss's work is amazing. If you've never seen her work, it's stunning. Anytime we have the capability and the need at our church to design something, we like we need like top shelf stuff, we go to Bliss.
Oh,
So we go
thanks.
to you. So anyways, you didn't just like say, I'm going to be an artist. This has been a long running.
Yes.
I think that's clear because I think I've had that same instinct to be like, oh, I wish we could visualize this in some way, but there's no chance I could do that, right? Like I could not like put something together and make it designed well and organized in a way that made sense. Like it would take me far too long to do anything remotely like you did. So that piece is actually critical. And
there's actually, sorry, we're like, I'm just excited about the story
keep
because
going.
as if other artists are hearing this, or really anyone who's hearing this, what I really appreciate about this moment in your story is, number one, you've had this long training, like you've been an artist, you've been trained, and you've had this skill set sort of there, available to you. And then you found your family in a sort of transition liminal space where like, what now? Mm-hmm. And in those spaces, at least I can resonate, are some of the most generative, creative moments.
Yes.
When everything you planned or had expected sort of crumbles or just goes away or changes.
Yeah.
And now you have all this space.
Yeah.
And no idea of what's coming next. Mm-hmm. And then another parallel stream to this is slowly being in the church's life, especially in a Neshoda house, especially such a beautiful aesthetic input sort of place, right? Mm-hmm. Slowly what's been deposited in you is the story of the church and its saints and its beauty. And so in this one moment, it seems like your skill set, this sort of moment of a blank slate, if you will, and all of this input then just is the perfect recipe for what becomes Modlit, really right?
Was. Yeah, really was.
And that's super cool because people in who may not be artists, they may find themselves in sort of a blank slate sort of moment. And that's really encouraging that actually God uses, like, that's when things begin to spark sometimes, the creation of new ideas that you didn't see coming. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now here you are.
And I don't think we even really thought, we're going to start a liturgical company.
For sure. Yeah,
I mean, it just kind of, and maybe in a good way, we really didn't think it through.
No, you did. But you know what? That's okay too, right? Like, let's shoot from the hip and see what happens, right?
It was, I think the response was really, really generous and really like fun. And I remember even sitting in a pub and showing you.
Yeah, I remember this.
Because we didn't live in the same city. We were just kind of like
this
friends.
This was years before we came to Austin.
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember you saying, I forget which one of you, it was someone on the left.
I don't remember.
I don't remember who it was. But I just remember both you were there and you were saying, what if we did this? What do you think about this with the saints? And like describe, and I was like, I couldn't think of anything that had been done like that. That was especially in the kind of caliber and the minimalism of your design, like not simplicity. I don't know if I have the right words for this, but you have a certain aesthetic, a type.
I do. I really did want to bring it into like a modern, simplistic kind of, almost pulling from like Art Deco is what I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
So I wanted it to feel very clean because sometimes I think it can feel so busy because there is so much content that you could put in there. And that's probably where Ryan comes in a lot, is like, just like Ryan said, he couldn't do it without me. I definitely could not do this without Ryan as a resource to write and to have a lot of input and to really make sure that what I'm actually doing is very accurate, you know? And the other thing I want to add is that I think that this expression for me is a learning experience. Like, I am not an expert. As far as like the liturgy goes, you know, I'm sort of putting this out there to then consume it back again throughout the year and let it kind of get in my bones as well. And that's the whole point, is for me to like continue to learn and to let like you know, Jesus, you know, implant more into me and like the liturgy to like shape us, you know. So
lest people think that we do morning and evening prayer every day with our kids. And we have the perfect liturgical, like that is not us. Yeah. We would, I mean, we do our best, right?
Yeah.
And there's seasons, right, where, you know, we're really engaging in this stuff. And there's seasons where we're just trying to get our kids fed and to bed and to school and all that kind of stuff. And some of this just, we're carried by liturgy in our church, you know, so.
You're just, I mean, like, again, another point for everyone else, as I'm hearing this going, like, there are seasons in life where you just got to make it happen or make what you can happen and cut yourself a lot of slack.
Yeah.
But in those moments, those are the moments of the most creative things where I remember, this is nowhere near Modlit, but I remember thinking, gosh, we need to be teaching our kids the faith. And the time we had with our kids was at the dinner table. And like, I could have pulled out the catechism. I could have done these things, but it was one of those, like, you know, parents can relate. You're just like, goodness gracious, I just hope we get through dinner and I'm ready to go to bed. And so whether it was laziness or I don't know, I remember teaching our kids about the story of Jesus healing the blind man using peanut butter, which was on the table, and like spitting into the dirt and making mud and like smearing it on the face. And it's sort of those moments of like kind of silly, mostly tired, and you're like, and you have, you know, loaded up with kids, you figure something out. So there's something that I recognize in that for you guys, but also for other people. You kind of make do with what you have, and you do the best with it. But the role of creativity in those moments is critical. And I think what I really admire about you guys is, I think most people, creativity takes a lot of courage, actually, especially to put it out there for other people to see. And what you did, and it's so unique, it took courage to say, here's this beautiful. The church has been doing calendars and like visualizations forever, right? But you were like, well, maybe we have something to offer that's unique. That I think that takes some guts. Ryan, did that feel that way because you especially gone through seminary, seeing the history of the church, knowing these resources are out there? Did that register for you to you at all? Like, this is sort of this is a courageous endeavor. This is like a little risky.
I think so. I mean, there's a part of me that felt like very defensive because, I mean, a lot of the vulnerability comes from like the artistic expression, right? Where it's like making choices about how you visualize this it's a vulnerable thing too, right? It's not you can speak more to that, I guess, but so there's a bit of I didn't feel as vulnerable personally, although I did because it's our thing. But I was like kind of defensive, like, people better like this. Is kind of how, you know, like, because I think it's great, and I've always loved what Bliss has done from even before Nashotah days. But even at Nashotah, the work that she did there to kind of like really bring them into the 21st century with her kind of her choices and her aesthetics to help them was incredible. I mean, it was. You know, that people still come to her this day and say, we loved what you did back then, you know?
But it was a bold choice.
Yeah, it was
a bold thing.
It was, yeah. And
I mean, not to make too much of this, but like, no, like it's sort of a bold endeavor.
Yeah. And so for me, it's like, I've never questioned anything that she's done artistically. It has a lot to do with how does this fit with the liturgy? How does this fit with like all of the content that we could put in? You know, a lot of it's about making choices because we could do everything. I mean, we get people who say, can you do a Roman Catholic version of this? Can you do a 1662 version of this? Can you do a 1928 prayer book version of that? I mean, we get all these questions about what we could or couldn't do. And there's vulnerability in like that, in the sense of like, we would love to do everything for everyone and please everyone. But like, we made some of the choices we did and we love it. And we just have to be okay with the fact that like, it's, like it blesses us, it blesses our community, and for everyone, we want it to bless as many people as we can. We can't do everything though, because this is
right.
You know,
and part of this I'm hearing is like, this is an expression of where you're at, the community of faith that you belong to, right? Like doing a Roman Catholic one would be amazing, but that's not the tradition you find yourself in.
Right. Yeah.
And we literally, I mean, we could do something along those lines, but if you get into the Roman Catholic tradition, then you've got different regions that want different things. I mean, it's more about like, if we had 48 hours in a day to do all these different kinds of things, like, yes, we would love that. But for what it is, like, we just can't do all of that.
Can I ask you a really nerdy niche question?
Yes, you can.
Do you find that the way that you've approached the liturgical calendar and the products that you guys have designed and put out there for the Christian year, even the saints, do you find that it occupies a sort of via media in a way, with like that, like Roman Catholics can still enjoy this, and maybe Eastern Orthodox people, and maybe like non-denom or like Baptist, Free Church sort of tradition, Protestant traditions? Do you find that you still have a community of people from various different traditions who are able to use this and track with the year?
You want to speak to that?
You want me to? Sure, I can say. I think I design it that way.
Okay.
I think maybe, you know, the Roman Catholic, they're wanting more. They're like, put more in there, you know? But I also wanted to make it the liturgy like approachable, you know, for people that like me. I think I think that I come back to more what I know because I feel like I can speak to that the most, which is like coming into the liturgy. What did that feel like? Everything I didn't know, I'm trying to use that to my advantage when I design, so that I can help other people kind of just enjoy the richness, even if this is not the way that they worship on a Sunday morning. In their home, they can like be filled with this beauty, and it can bless them, you know. And I actually, when I with the design stuff, I wanted to draw from like Christian artwork as like ancient Christian artwork, but I also don't reference a lot of like Christian artwork when I design myself. I usually look at like other design eras to try to pull in aesthetics, because I want it to feel like kind of modern and familiar, like on a different level than just like only like Christian, if that makes sense.
That's really interesting, because it would be really easy for you to be heavily resourced by like iconography or all these Christian traditions have very particular aesthetic characteristics, right? Yours stands out. Yours is a bit different. And it sounds like you did this by sort of setting a limit or a boundary for yourself. Like, no, here's what I'm going to consume visually in order to be inspired to make the thing I'm after. And you're saying yes to something, but you're also saying no to a whole lot.
Yeah.
Right? Is that a fair summary?
Because I think that there's a certain design aesthetic that appeals to me that I want to like give to people in the church.
Yeah.
You know?
And that has blessed people. I mean, I think it's intuitively, or your aesthetic kind of taste in this is something that is like a lot of people really do value it. It's not I don't know how to express it. Like if you go on Etsy, or if you like search for liturgical calendars, there are some out there, but nothing looks quite like. I mean, all of them have their own kind of aesthetic kind of angle at the liturgy and the calendar and all that. But yours, I think, just kind of is this kind of blend of appreciating and kind of honoring the tradition, which is why we have stained glass windows that you adapt, or icons or things like that. But then you bring this modern take on it that I think is like a lot of people really do appreciate, you know.
We should get to this, but we keep talking about like your style, because and the take that you have, the approach that you have, because that's actually super interesting. It sticks out. If you haven't seen Modlit's work, you should go look. Just go, what's your website again?
Modernliturgic.com.
Modernliturgic.com. MODERNLITURGIC.com.
Yep.
Did I get that right?
I'm sure Alex can put it in the show notes too.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. But go look at it and you'll know what we're talking about. But I think so if someone who doesn't know anything about Modlit, and that's what we call it, by the way, on the streets, Modlit, is like, so what do you actually make? Let's get to that. We sort of buried the lead on this.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you make?
So we have a poster, which we already showed, that shows the whole liturgical year.
It's like it's a print you can put on your wall, and it's evergreen, right?
Yes. So it's a generalized understanding of the full year. Starts in Advent at the top, and then goes all the way around. So it doesn't start in January like you would see in the annual calendar year. But the inner circle actually is kind of references the traditional year that you would see. And then
I see the months. Yeah,
Yep.
you got it.
Yeah, the months are right there. Yeah.
If you're listening, we're looking at an 11 by 17, poster size thing. It's beautiful on this like sort of off-white paper that is just beautiful.
Yep.
And has a big circle with the church year. I don't know. How do you explain? You just got to see it. You got to see it. Go see it. So you guys sell just the look at the year as a poster in general. You sell that standalone.
Yeah, and we just introduced an 11 by 14 version of it. That's
Of
a
the
little
same thing?
more simplified, and 11 by 14 is a really good frame size for people. So we offer that as well, just for convenience, really.
Yeah.
So what's cool for this thing in particular that I have it like in my office at home, in the house, like we have the calendar, and there's a view of this as well, a sort of smaller view. What's really cool about, like, if someone says, why would you want a big circle of the church year on your wall? It's actually really cool to be able to locate yourself. Like you would look at a clock on the wall. This is sort of a church clock on the wall for me. Like, what time is it?
No.
And as a way of locating even your spiritual practices, where your head should be, like if you find yourself like right now, you look up at the wall and you're in Advent, two things occur to me. One, we're at the beginning of the church year and we're preparing for something like these big purple sections cue me spiritually to be here in this time right now. So it's sort of a clock on the wall. And I think it's really cool also for kids to be able to say, where do you think we are?
Yeah.
In our church, we have like a big liturgical dial that we teach kids with as well. But this is just really helpful, quick reference of like, what time is it? Where are we? Right. In the whole church year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it does give expression to the idea that like, there's rhythm to our year.
Yeah.
Like even that for me is just helpful just to be reminded of every time I look at it to say, it's not just like one blank thing. It's like, oh, there's seasons. There's things we can get excited about. There's rhythms that help us in our journey, and I've always appreciated that. That's one of the things that's always been most foundational for me with liturgical seasons and things like that. Is that it's just forming me every single year. We come back to these things, and they help remind us of what's important about our faith. So. Yeah,
that's awesome. So that's one thing. Yeah, what else do you make?
You want to see?
Oh, sure. So the calendar then also begins in Advent, which is typically December, and it has like a slice of the colors at the top to show you where you are.
This is not your grandmother's calendar. Your grandmother would love it.
She would. She would totally love
Anyone's
it.
grandma would.
So,
but this is amazing. Go ahead. Sorry.
It goes into more detail. So on the general kind of circle calendar, it shows the weeks, but actually it goes into each day, and this is specific to the year. So each little increment is one day, so you can actually like really chart out where you are, and the markings on the top part are specific to the day. So then we call out the season, we call out a saint, and we
so
call
like the
out
seasons, for instance, and this is Advent,
yes,
and Christmastide on this one thing. Okay,
right.
Yep.
And then we always feature a saint, and in the bottom half we actually have a traditional calendar laid out with all of the saints that would be in that month. And the feast days. So this month we have Nicholas of Myra. Is that
Myra?
Right? Myra.
Yep. Saint Nicholas.
I don't know why I said it like that.
That's okay.
Shoot. I wrote it. I see it as shape.
No,
okay.
it's all good.
Yes. So Brian can speak to that a little bit more because he does all the research and writing for each of the different pieces.
Yeah, I mean,
so he's the church nerd of the operation.
I am, and
we're
to
finally getting to it.
Speaking of the nerd, speaking of the nerd, nerding out from the question you had said earlier about how do we balance this for Roman Catholics and Anglicans, Episcopalians, non-denominational type evangelicals. I do actually think we've done our best to kind of find some kind of via media here because we are basing it on one prayer book, so the 79 prayer book in the Anglican tradition. But I honestly think that is like the things that we do with it really are meant for everyone. Mm-hmm. It's not meant, just for Episcopalians or Anglicans.
Or anyone who's into liturgy even. You can just be from a non-liturgical, non-traditional church and still really enjoy this.
Yeah, and we try to, I wouldn't say exactly... I'm not doing the same kind of work that Bliss is doing with the aesthetic side of things, but in writing it and rewriting it a few times as we've done over the years, I really am trying to speak to as large of an audience as I can. So kind of not trying to use insider language as much as possible with describing Nicholas or whatever saint, or describing the seasons, things like that. We try to help people into this who might be new to it, for example.
Yeah, and this is a great example, this page, because everybody knows Christmas. Yeah. Everybody knows Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. But on this page, you're actually connected to, there's a season before Christmas. There's Advent. There's preparation. Mm-hmm. It's purple or blue. And this is the point of that season. And then Christmastide. You may be familiar with Christmas, but there's a whole bunch of information about the season of Christmastide as a 12-day and a whole a moment, right, in the church year. And then you may know Santa Claus, but did you know this about Bishop Nicholas?
Yeah.
And the picture of him as a saint, as a bishop, and then the backstory. This is such a formative tool. Like you don't have to, and anyone can. You don't have to have any like you don't have to have a seminary degree. You can just read this as it comes up and enjoy it throughout the year. That's like a really accessible, and that's what I've enjoyed about it.
Totally. And for me, it's like it was such a gift to like dig into these saints and learn about their history, learn about their writings, things like that. And we're featuring just one of them. There's like tons of saints each month that you could like. And I think you mentioned this, or is that on each page we highlight in the calendar we highlight all of the saints that are celebrated during that month. So you could
in the
monthly part at the bottom we highlight. So
any
day you can like look up on the calendar and say, hey, is there a saint that I can like dig into and look up online and read about? Because all of these saint stories are just wonderful. There's so much like richness to their stories that can encourage us in our modern times. So like for me, it was a gift to be able to dig in and write these little blurbs every month, because it's just like, oh, I didn't know how much I really like Hildegard of Bingen, like, and I wrote about it and I'm like, oh man, yeah. And things like that. So I don't know if you have any other.
Yeah, no, that's great.
What other, so you have this calendar, it goes throughout the year. What other, I know you guys make other things.
Well, we made a planner in the past. I'm going to revamp that for 2025.
Nice.
Yeah. And I've got other things, percolating in there. Like,
we have a lot of people asking for the planner.
Yeah.
We didn't do it this year. We just couldn't do it this year, but I know that's on, like Bliss is already cooking that up right now.
Yeah.
So people get excited for the planner for next year. Do you want to say more about like the planner and like what features it has so people can get excited about it?
Sure. The planner has a lot of the seasonal information in it, but it actually is a daily layout so that you could do the daily office. And then it has...
Which for the non-Anglican people and non-Episcopalian people... No, I'm just trying to keep it real with everybody. Is morning and evening prayers, specifically what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. Yes. So for some, it might be like devotional in the morning, your morning devotions, or your sort of evening time of prayer. This is what you're laying out. That and in it, I'm sure, and I know because I've seen the planner before, at least the one a couple years ago. It's a simple and accessible way of like structuring your time of prayer and taking inventory and doing the exam and like these sort of spiritual disciplines, right?
Yeah,
Continue.
Yeah. So it'll have the daily office in it and some other features, collects and some little. I'm trying to think of some things in the back that were references that you were like, these will help pastors. Great.
Oh yeah, we did like the Sunday lectionary.
Oh yeah, the Sunday lectionary.
We kind of see it as like a resource that can be used in different ways, right? So like for some people, if they're into the daily office, on each day we have the readings for that day, so they could use it kind of as a devotional resource where they read the scriptures and maybe write reflections in that day.
Right.
Some people use it as like their actual planner where they're writing appointments and things like that, but it kind of gives them some of the like collects and prayers and things like that, so they can pray throughout their day, but they actually use it as an like appointment book essentially, right?
Yeah, I mean it's very.
So there's
that's kind of an interesting idea too, because if you think about it, we've all had like prayer journals and then we have planners, but to integrate the way we structure and schedule and spend our time leads us into a life that's actually more integrated. So we don't have this spiritual compartment and then a real life compartment, but this whole thing is being tied together in this planner.
And we're not gonna like
this planner may fix your whole life's problems. That's what I'm trying to say.
It was genius, I think, the way that it was designed. I think because it was, and we kind of left it open. We didn't say you need to use it this way. It was like people can kind of decide what they want to use it for, honestly. But in the future, we've talked about developing different kinds of planners or devotional kind of material where it is more intentional around kind of doing more devotional, contemplative stuff. So that's still something we're cooking up for future use. Yeah.
So there's another part of this that maybe people aren't either convinced of or maybe just never heard of, which is, and we're sort of doing this whole episode backwards, but this is how I run this operation, so deal with it. A church year, what is that? And then like why? And then what's the value of daily readings? There's they're related actually questions, right? Because the readings are related to the church year, and they have to do with the way we're spending our time and walking this journey throughout the year. We're walking through a certain kind of story. Could you, and I'm curious how Modlit people would describe this. So I'm just curious, like what value do you personally find in walking the church year? Spiritually, as a family, as a person, like why would anyone want to like be interested in the way church tells time?
Yeah, I mean, and this actually is in some of our materials.
So let's just let them buy it. If you want to know,
If you want to know, it's on the first page. No, I mean, so this gets into our story a little bit too, but like I grew up in a liturgical setting for a while in my young years, and then kind of went into the evangelical world. You grew up in more of an evangelical context. But one of the things I always thought about when I was a kid was like, there are these seasons, there are these things that church did that I was like too young to really understand what was happening, but it was like forming me in ways that I didn't even know were happening. I mentioned this in the sermon this last Sunday, like, so things like Advent were like they kind of were a part of my rhythm without even knowing it. And so when I learned about Advent as a part of this church year, it made a lot of sense to me. And I was like, oh, this is like, why are we only celebrating Christmas? Like, we need this season. This is like this seems like it's built in as like it's
part of the story.
It's a part of the story, and it's like a perfect, in our context, it's like a perfect antidote to like how culturally we are formed around Christmas, right? Where we're waiting for gifts and we're waiting for just to be formed by.
We're waiting to celebrate.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But like, so there is something like, I think, intuitive about the church year that I think speaks to like where we're at, and like I think so that's one thing I would say. And feel free to chime in at all. But I think there's something about the church year, especially from Advent through Easter and Pentecost. There's something about the way in which that tells the story of God, so that we never, like, every year we're confronted with it in a way that is like, we don't forget like the central story, right? Like,
and each part of it too.
And
right?
each part of it,
right.
In the Old Testament, in Advent, waiting for the Messiah to come, to Christmas and the incarnation, and the importance, the significance of the incarnation, to the Epiphany of the world coming to know Jesus in the Epiphany season, and then Lent, our penitential, preparing ourselves for not just the incarnation, but the fact that God came into the world to die and rise again. Like that whole story, resurrection, Easter, like all of that. It's like we never are at like with the church year, if we embrace that, like I don't think we're ever at risk of forgetting. Like
You'll always be confronted by it.
Yeah,
right?
you have to.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't. So you never find yourself kind of in weird spaces or like kind of going off the rails. It's like it always kind of centers us in a way.
Yeah.
So that's what I appreciated about it. And that's what I've always like. That's why I will never be like not liturgical, wherever,
But in some ways, like even people going, what is liturgical?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like they are. I mean, we are liturgical beings. I mean, my opinion is I don't think you can be a human being without having patterns and rhythms and habits and like emotions you go through. Yeah. They're not bad. Paying attention to them can be really, really helpful and good. Like you go to a therapist and they're going to tell you like, hey, do you notice this about yourself? And that's like some of the most insightful stuff. Like, no, I didn't know I do that all the time. And I do that when this happens. Like it's sort of self-understanding and trying to like inhabit the time that you have and the person that you are and like the life you have. One of the things I love about the liturgical calendar, the way it's been a blessing for me, I've always grown up as someone who in the church, I was always blessed with being in churches that made a lot about following Jesus. You heard that all the time. Like this is about following Jesus. And it wasn't until I entered a church that was using the church year, the calendar. And actually, to be fair, growing up Methodist, it was all there the whole time. I was just like a kid and I wasn't paying attention. I was kind of a dumb church kid. I was a pastor's kid, so it was worse. But as an adult, I began to appreciate that actually the church year is a way of actually following Jesus. Like you said, in Advent, we're talking about even long before Advent, the announcement to Mary, you're pregnant. And then following that storyline in Advent and with all the prophets and all the patriarchs and everybody in the voices crying out in the wilderness, John the Baptist, all of the people that came before the Lord announcing his arrival. That's all like part of the story. So walking with them is following Jesus, and then to his birth, and then to his baptism or his circumcision. We shouldn't forget about that. To his birth, to his birth, circumcision, baptism, and then moving forward. So if someone's listening to this going, this just sounds like super traditional or Catholic or something, I would appeal to you saying, do you like to follow Jesus? Do you want to follow Jesus? Then why don't you follow him through his story? And the way to do that and not skip over things and to like really savor every moment of the story and really walk with them like a disciple is to tell time with the church through the church year. I think that's like, for me, you know me, Ryan.
Yeah.
Bliss, you know, I love to celebrate Easter, and I would much prefer to just jump over Lent, which is why Lent is so important for me, for someone like me. And so in some ways, like there's parts of the year that super fun, that totally resonate with you. You're going to love it. But then there's parts of the year that you don't like, that frustrate you, or that just sort of make you bristle. Those moments are for you too, like especially those moments, right? And so the church year lets you, it disciplines you actually to walk through even the stuff that kind of stinks. Yeah. And you don't do it alone. You do it with a community. Yeah. And you do it with a historic community, and you do it with people throughout the globe all at the same time. Which brings me to the next thing about like readings in the daily office. Why is that for someone who maybe just like, I want to open up the Bible and read what I want to read? Where's the value in having a calendar of readings, like a schedule? We talk about the lectionary. That's just a fancy church word for the schedule of readings. Or the Sunday lectionary you mentioned. Those are the readings that are assigned for Sunday. What's super cool about that is like when we read those passages on Sunday or we preach from them, we're joining the global church. Everybody, I mean, not everybody, but most of the church is literally on that same page, meditating on these same things from the Word of God. So why would that be a value in like the daily office and thinking about your planner, getting on the same page with the rest of the church? Why? Maybe I'm answering my own question, but like, how does that benefit people?
I mean, to kind of play off what you're just saying right now, like, I think the daily office just like fits so well into the whole arc of the story, you know? And I think, what you were saying about Lent and Easter and all, you know, like the kind of the waiting periods that are in the year, having not grown up with Lent really, or these other structures, like, I think that there was a lot of like, in a good way, in some ways, you know, there was a lot of partying, out in celebrating, or like really like, there's a lot of happiness in the church.
We know how to do happiness, you and
well,
I,
I'm saying, I mean, like in the evangelical church growing up,
gotcha.
There wasn't like a time of waiting and grief, you know? And I think that actually I appreciate that a lot, that the celebrating is so much more the richer. And we do know how to celebrate. We celebrate really well. And we actually celebrate, I think, a lot more in some ways. But there's sort of like this like thread of just ongoing happiness that I felt a lot in church.
Oh, I see.
Versus the real complex emotions that we feel as people.
So like the preparation and the grief and the self-denial that comes before these major celebrations like Christmas and Easter actually make those celebrations like actual, like way better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sort of I've always said, like, I think that the world doesn't know how to party well.
Yeah.
But the church can teach the world to party, and it begins with self-denial and grief and like taking inventory, penitence, like these sorts of things, crying out because things are not the way they should be and making things right in anticipation of this major feast party day that's coming up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then layering the scriptures over that to where you're really going through the whole year and not passing over things that are just difficult to digest or to preach on or to read. I think that makes the Christian year so much richer if you are someone who's trying to read the Bible regularly, which I think piety and regular Bible reading was so encouraged when I was young, but how to read the Bible, like how to kind of group things together and even place them in the year, has been very meaningful for me to experience, to be able to like, kind of like you said, go through that with a community, to have that you're interacting with it on a Sunday, and then you're like doing it personally as well, but you have some like a guide, you know.
Right.
It's like you don't have to read it that way, but I think to have a structure to access is like so useful.
It puts like these strange prophetic voices that maybe we don't want to read for morning devotions, or we're like, what is this guy's problem? Like, who is John the Baptist? Or like, who is Amos? And it sort of takes those readings, which we're going through right now, and puts them in like a nice little cubby of like, this is their part of the story.
Yeah.
They're pointing toward this one who is to come, and the things they have to say are fascinating. Rather than them just opening our Bible and going, I'm going to go to my favorite book and just camp out in my favorite passages and never really tour the rest of the Bible.
Yeah.
The liturgical calendar and the daily office readings, that schedule, it sort of holds your hand through the rest of Scripture.
It does,
and
yes.
places it within the larger story.
And I think too, the regular reading of the Old Testament, the New Testament, a Psalm, and the Gospel, like on a daily basis, is also really helpful. Like I've found that's helpful because I've been in traditions where they tend to always want to read just the epistles, or they tend towards reading, certain parts of Scripture. So it's not just our favorite parts, but also like our favorite sections too, where no, every day you got to read from these 4 sources from the Scriptures, which are so critical, to get a full breadth of the story of God, I think, in a lot of ways. So I think that's helpful. And I mean, and you mentioned this, Bliss, but we grew up, if you grew up evangelical, there was all sorts of Bible reading plans to read through Scriptures. I know they've like,
there's nothing new, right?
They sell Bibles that are like
day 1.
Yeah, seriously, it's like
Yes.
And you get to day 3, and then it sits on your shelf for the rest of the year.
Right. But I mean, I'm not gonna critique those at all. Like to say, like, they're just selling a Bible.
It just didn't work for me.
Right.
I felt like I missed a day. I'm like, it's all lost. I'll start next year.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that's to say. I mean, to the point is like, this is kind of built into the prayer book tradition to just read through the Bible. Regularly. And if you were to do the daily office, you read through the Psalms like every 60 days. And there's a version of it that you can read the Psalms through every 30 days. And you just reading through the Psalms for me has been wonderful. It helps me to pray because it's touching on so many aspects of life, grief and anxiety and loss of hope, but also joy and excitement and rejoicing. Just even that in and of itself is like such a critical part of like developing our prayer life is reading through the Psalms. So that's just one aspect of a lot of things that we could talk about. But
I know that you guys well enough. We can land the plane, but I know you know well enough to know that this isn't just like a sort of a artistic business. This is you have been so formed by the calendar, by the lives of the saints, by the daily office in this Christian tradition. And I think it's really cool. You're using the skills and the knowledge that you have to give people a way in to that wealth. And so this is sort of an invitation into those things. And it's a real gift of spiritual formation, like actually following Jesus in the story, being in Scripture, being in community, and being shaped by it, and being told the time that it is and who you are and the love of God for you. And what he's doing in the world and where things are going. This is like an invitation into that kind of formation. So to anyone and this is why I actually love making a big deal about Modlit and what you guys do, because it's a gift to people who want to enter into the story of God and to do with God's people. So if you're interested in this, if you're in a place where I've never tried stuff like this, or I don't know if my church would be down with this, I don't do it secretly. It's fine. And it's not a secret because the whole church globally, if you're in good company. Most of the church
we have a lot of
does this
evangelicals who secretly buy our
calendar people.
Yeah.
So if you feel like, if you're in a moment in your life maybe where you feel a little spiritually stagnant, or just like, I don't know, I need something. I need more to the diet that I have. Or maybe you just want to try something new in this next year in 2024. Pick up Modlit stuff and find yourself a church. Come to Res, first of all, like that might even go through the church year. Or maybe I should say this: stay at your church, but ask them about the church year.
Yeah.
Maybe folks just don't know that this is available to them, and it's not some weird ancient thing. This belongs to you.
Yeah.
If you're a Christian, this belongs to you. You don't have to go find a special church that does it. I'll roll all that back. But if you need a church, come to our church. Thank you for spending time with us. Just telling the backstory. I know it's a gift to so many people, and if they could all be in this room and give you a big hug and say thanks. I hope you feel a little overwhelmed about the impact this has had on so many people's spiritual lives. That's like a really big deal. It's really a ministry. It's really cool. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for offering your gifts and your talents in this way to making something so beautiful. And just one more plug, go to modernliturgic.com and check out this stuff. And can people contact you on that website and reach out and say something
Or
to
on
you?
Instagram.
Or on Instagram as well, on all the socials.
Facebook,
Yeah.
Instagram. We also
TikTok.
There's a sign up for the newsletter. That's great because we try to send out updates and things like that to let people know what's happening, what new products that might be coming out, things like that.
Yeah. So when I'm going to put you on the spot, when can we expect maybe a planner idea? Are we going to do this next year or?
Yeah, it'll come out.
Or should people just get on the website and just demand a planner and then it'll happen magically?
I think that's
Well,
a big part of it.
I will be working on it this spring and hopefully launching in the summer.
Okay, cool. So we can look forward in the summer.
So, I don't know. We haven't really talked about whether it would be I think it'll start for Advent next year, but in years to come, I might do one that's academic or things like that. So
Cool.
yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, Bliss.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thanks
being
so
here,
much for
Ryan,
having
talking
us.
about it. Go check out modernliturgic.com, y'all.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all, I hope you're enjoying this podcast. I'm Father Shawn McCain-Tiras. I'm the rector at Resurrection, and we're so glad that you're with us. If you have comments or questions or maybe ideas for future topics that you would like us to tackle in future episodes, we would love to hear from you. This podcast and every ministry of our church is made possible by the generosity of our community. So to all of you who are giving to make this possible, thank you. You help us not only make this resource available to us, but to everyone. If you want to help us out and join in that community of support, we would love that. You can get a hold of us and explore ways you can give at resaustin.com/podcast. Thanks again. And until next time, the peace of the Lord be always with you.